The top chess opening of all time is the King's Indian defense. The King's Indian defense, a forced win for black. You move the knight, you push your pawn, you do a pawn storm, you rip open the king, you sack something, you bring the queen in the attack, and not only is this lead to a forced checkmate, you can do this with your eyes completely closed. F5, F4, G5, G4, G3, sack something, queen out, checkmate. Hey guys, it's GM Max here, and we are here at Illingworth Chess. Improve your chess. So, for this video, I'm going to show you the real top chess openings, not the ones where we just all pie in the sky, close our eyes, and we automatically win with the black pieces in 10 moves with some sneaky trap. No, I'm going to show you the real top chess openings. The real openings are objectively the best ones to play, and let's start with what I consider to be the best openings to play against E4. Now, best can be relative, obviously at different levels, there'll be different systems, but I'm referring to the systems that are the most effective, according to the super deep chess computer analysis and the lines that have been played successfully by the best players in the world, including the past world champions. So it really depends, are you going for the win, or are you alright with a draw? Because your answer to this question is going to vary what will be the top chess opening for you. If you want to play very solidly, then a top chess opening is the Berlin Roy Lopez, where we meet bishop to b5 with knight to f6, and we're just developing our knights very classically in the center. The Berlin endgame, of course, arising with castles. Knight takes e4. White has a few alternatives, and you can already hear the people outside protest like, oh, not another Berlin! Anything but the Berlin, Max! But, I gotta be honest, I gotta show you the best opening, and, as boring as some people claim the Berlin is, it's a pretty dang good opening. After d takes c5, d takes c5, knight to f5, we have the swap of queens, and you can kind of see why the Berlin has such a solid reputation. Because even though your pawn structure is a bit ugly, and your king's in the center, you have virtually an impregnable light squared fortress that, if black plays correctly, white has no real way to get through this. So, in other words, this system, it's very hard for white to prove any kind of advantage, to the point where quite a few players actually will play moves like bishop c4 or d4, just to try to avoid the Berlin and try to get a game. But there as well, you can kind of just play classically and get a perfectly good position as black. Another option also has a very, very solid reputation. I could add the Marshall Gambit as well, the lines where you go knight f6, bishop b7, and go for the d5 gambit. That's another one I guess could also include a top tier opening, again playing more for a solid draw, but with some more active piece play in mind. But the other system that's also very, very solid if you're just happy with a draw is Solano's the Petrov, which has been played by world champions like Vladimir Kramnik, Fabiano Caruana, and white hasn't really managed to prove even a slight advantage. In fact, in correspondence, the Petrov has basically been worked out to a draw, where shown at white's little first move initiative doesn't really lead anywhere. So if you want to basically play to make sure that you basically don't lose, and you're willing to give up a little bit of winning chances in order to more or less like maximize your chance of not losing and still have some chance of winning yourself, well then certainly e5 is the most reliable way to do it. But if you want something a little bit spicier, well then there's the Sicilian defense, which I think that is really the best move to play that's not 1e5. 1e5 is one played by most of the top GMs in the world, but the Sicilian is a close second, and actually is more popular at lower levels of play. And of all the Sicilians, I find there are two main Sicilians that basically give black full equality. The one I'd say is the most reliable and what would be my top chess opening against e4 period, at least in terms of maximizing your winning chances. It's a line known as the Knight-off Sicilian, where we can see that the idea of playing d6 is that we're going knight f6 without our knight getting kicked away by an e5 move later, because our pawn's stopping it. And after knight c4, we played a knight off with a6. And the reason that a knight off has really a better reputation than pretty much any of the other Sicilians for black, even the Sveshnikov, is that it's so flexible. With a6, you're preparing the e5 move to hit back in the center and kick the knight without allowing any annoying bishop b5 checks. But you're not limited to playing the move e5 either. While that certainly would be quite nice to match white space in the center, if they play some other move like bishop g5, you can still go e6 and still have a very good Scandinavian structure where they didn't manage to get some g4, g5 hack attack on the king. And enjoy with ideas like being able to play on the queen side later. You're usually going to have pretty good counterplay in these sort of middle games as black. So basically, Knight-off is just a very good system, and I don't really have anything bad to say about it. Obviously, when you have such a system that gives you such flexibility and great winning chances, of course there is going to be a lot of fury built up with it. So that's one thing to keep in mind with these top chess openings, because they are objectively the best openings for black to play, as been proven by the computers, by the correspondence players, and by the world chess champions. Obviously, that means there's going to be a bit more work involved in mastering a lines, but I do believe that's absolutely worth it. And to help you on that journey of mastery, do make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Illingworth Chess channel, that little icon on the bottom right with my nice smiling face. Alright, so other than the Knight Off, well, the other Sicilian I would probably put in the top tier, but not quite as high as the Knight Off, is the Sveshnikov with Knight C6. And the reason I don't put it as a top tier is not because of the Sveshnikov itself, because it's kind of pretty well known these days that after Knight F6, Knight C3 and E5, that White's not really proving any kind of realistic advantage here. Although I guess lines like Knight DB5, like there's a trend of Knight D5 that has got some potential, but I wouldn't say that gives White more of an edge in any lines of the Knight Off, as it were. But the reason I rank Knight C6 a bit of a lower tier is because I think that the Rossolimo is objectively a stronger line, and I believe this does give White a very small advantage out of the opening. Whereas if you take D6, Bishop B5 by contrast, you get some extra options that you don't have when your knight is already pinned. For example, you can play Bishop D7 very solidly, or what I would say is a top tier move is to go Knight D7 and just kick the bishop. And that can allow you to potentially get the bishop pair advantage without getting doubled pawns like you would in the Rossolimo lines, you know, where they go Bishop C6 and mess up your pawn structure. When you play D6, Knight D7, you're kind of able to often win the bishop pair or win some time without that sort of weakness in your structure resulting. So that's why basically against E4, if I had to rank the lines, like I'd say number 1 is the Berlin, that's the absolute most solid, with the Petrov being a pretty close second. And then for the Sicilians, I would say the top tier, among this top tier Sicilian, is the Knight Off in the first place, without question to me. If you want something, it's kind of a little bit of middle ground, kind of solid, but still giving you some winning chances. I would say that Caro-Kann would come next on the list, but I do believe that Caro-Kann does give White more chance for an advantage than the other lines, so I honestly can't say it's a top chess opening, but it comes pretty close, and it's a line that, you know, most players, let's say, are not going to have the technique to convert that plus 0.2 advantage compared to the plus 0.1 that they get in the other lines. Well, we all know that eventually, like the opening period, that eventually the engine will say it's 0-0-0, and then, you know, either a draw is agreed, or Magnus Carlsen manages to grind out a win anyway. Alright, so let's continue with seeing some system against D4. You know, I already mentioned the King's Indian beforehand in the introduction, in a little teaser. And yeah, as you probably could tell from my tone, I was joking a little bit about Close Your Eyes and Forced Mate, even though there are a lot of King's Indian players who play it like that. I would say if I was pressing what the absolute top chess opening is against 1 D4, it would be the Nimzo Indian. So that is after Knight F6, C4 rather than G6, going for the move E6. And the Nimzo is if they go Knight C3, well, we don't let them play E4, but instead we play in a hyper-modern style. We channel my system with Bishop to B4. I really believe that Nimzo is the most flexible defense against D4, because you can play it in so many different ways. You can play it with the pawn going to D5, you can put the pawn on C5, you can go for a queenside fianchetto, and there are even other approaches you see occasionally, like playing D6 and E5 in a Bogo Indian kind of style. So really a lot of ways to play Nimzo, so there's almost certainly going to be some system here within this complex that is likely to be to your taste. But of course, there's always a catch. Like, if the Nimzo is such a great opening, like, why doesn't every single person play it, Max? Well, A, because they are not, you know, following Illingworth Chess, haven't subscribed yet, but also because White can avoid it. So after C4, E6, well, White can play the move Knight F3 and avoid the Nimzo Indian. In that case, I would say the top tier reply is to transpose back to a Queen's Gambit decline with D5. White's already committed to move Knight F3. Now, you might be thinking, well, Max, if you want to play Queen's Gambit decline, why wouldn't you play the move D5 instead and just go C4 and E6? And the answer is that basically White gets some extra options when he hasn't played Knight F3. I might have talked about this in top chess openings for White, but in case I didn't, a key point is after Knight C3 and Knight F6, the White now gets the extra option to exchange variation with CD5. He takes D5 and Bishop G5. And that's an annoying pin where White does get a tiny bit of an edge in these lines. So basically with this move order, by threatening the Nimzo, we're avoiding the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit declined en route to reaching the QGD. Because CD5 is a lot less effective when White's committed to the move Knight to F3. It's something I have covered in a later video on how to play the semi-Slav. We'll just kind of explain why it is that you don't want to mix Knight F3 with CD5 early in these positions. It's a much more flexible move is Knight C3, and this is sort of a point where there are a lot of top tier systems for Black. I would say the absolute top tier based on correspondence play is the semi-Slav with C6. The semi-Slav is simply a really strong opening where White's not really managed to prove even the slightest hint of an advantage. You know, the computers have more or less worked out things such as, let's say, the Moscow variation and even the Botvinnik variation was to a forced draw. Of course, in a over-the-board practical game, it's a very different story. Positions are very sharp and a better player will win. But in correspondence mode, it's been proven that, the lines of how to equalize for black have been shown. And also another point is that if they do play some other move, well, if they go e3, like again, this is just very solid for black, and in many cases, the plan like going dc4, b5 is just going to give black very good queenside counterplay. So in any case, it is worth pointing out there are other very high tier openings for black as well. I would say that the semi-Slav would be at my absolute top tier, and I think that the Nimzo move order is slightly more precise than using the Slav move order, for reasons I'll explain in a moment. But I'd say that the next one tier I would have is probably the Queen's Gambit declined classical style with Bishop e7. I do think that the black bend does give white a bit of an easier position to play, but it's not really an objective advantage, and black's definitely doing okay there. And in third place, I'd probably rank the Rogozin with Bishop b4. It's a nice active system. There are lines they can go Bishop g5 or Queen a4 and try to be annoying, but objectively black has more or less figured out the ways to equalize, and I think it's a little bit harder work to equalize in these lines from a practical perspective than, say, the semi-Slav, but it also is a little bit less theoretical. There are somewhat less games that have been played, so it's going to be a decent sort of semi-shortcut that's still relatively mainline and still played by a lot of top players like Aroni and Geary and Carlson and many others. And if I had to put one in fourth place, I'd say like there is lines like, c5 and there are these weird semi-Tara cd4 lines where you just play for a draw. But that's probably not going to be a taste of most of people watching this. Why don't you guys do want to keep more winning chances alive in your games? But this is a line that has been proving very hard for the top players to prove an edge in. So if you're just happy to make a draw, this is one way to do so. And yeah, if they played Catalan, like there are a lot of good systems against the Catalan, but I would rank the Bishop b4 check as being the top tier one, and I'd probably put Bishop e7 and the lines where you go like castles d4 as a very close second place, where again the top players have shown that white doesn't really get any special advantage if black continues to play precisely. Okay, I've talked quite a lot about this Queen's Gambit because I'm very passionate about it. But what about a couple of other top tier systems? Like let's say you have some sort of allergy to playing the move e6, like you want a Fiend Keto or something. Well, what should you do instead? I would say that the other top tier system, and this one ranks very close with the Nimzo semi-Slav combination. Objectively, it's just as good, but I do think it's slightly harder for most players to find the best moves to prove your equality. And that's the Grindfelt with g6, knight c3, and d5. The Grindfelt, there's nothing really bad I can say about it. The lines are ones where you do get a lot of active piece play, after knight c5, cd5, knight d5, e4. This is the main line, but, black's moves are pretty straightforward, c5, and just pile the pressure on the center. And white's tried pretty much every sort of idea known to mankind at this point, but at this stage it more or less has just been worked out to equality. White doesn't have any way to get some kind of special advantage here. In fact, it's sort of reached a point where a lot of players will actually try to avoid the Grindfelt at a Grandmaster level. They'll play moves like a Fiend Keto with g3 or even an anti-Grindfelt f3, or they might even play a move like one knight f3 or one c4, just trying to avoid the Grindfelt altogether. So it's definitely a very serious opening, in one way if you are very well prepared, then you can basically fully equalize out of the opening. But it does require like a very deep understanding and a lot of memorization. So obviously it's not going to probably appeal that much to the average player, but objectively it is a top tier chess opening, I would say, almost at the same level as Nimzo and semi-Slav. The only reason I rank Nimzo and semi-Slav higher is not for objective reasons, but because it's just kind of easier, I think, for most players to find the moves that allow you to equalize in those positions, where if you can't make a second best move, you'll often still be doing okay. Whereas in a Grindfelt, if you don't get the exact move right in many positions, you could just have, well, a rather depressing position. And that's not what we want to have to play like a computer, because, well, I haven't yet got that, microchip inserted in my wrist, I'm still waiting on Elon Musk to deliver there. In any case, going back to other options, King's Indian is objectively, in correspondence, white hasn't really managed to prove any big advantage, but it is, again, one of these lines where it's practically a lot harder for black to find the moves to maintain the balance than it is in some of the other lines I mentioned, like the e6 lines or even the Grunfeld probably. So it definitely is a lot more demanding. And then you have other systems, like I did promise I would say why I consider the Slav move order a little bit less precise a way in order to get to the semi-Slav. The reason is that I find that the move knight f3 and e3 is a little bit sort of annoying on a theoretical perspective, where it's not a big edge for white, but I mean, if you do play e6, white's not forced to go knight c3, but you get some good extra options that sort of make the semi-Slav look just very slightly imprecise, whereas moves like bishop f5 and bishop g4 are also lines where white does seem to have a very small pull to work with. It might be more of a practical pull than an objective one, but I feel like it's harder for black to prove equality in these lines than some of the other ones I mentioned. And I kind of feel similarly about the Queen's Gambit Accepted. If you're playing Correspondence, yeah, Queen's Gambit Accepted more or less kills d4 as a try for an advantage. But in practical play, white's extra space tends to give him good chances to, well, to make black's life a bit difficult, to find a lot of good moves to again prove equality. Like, it's one thing you've probably already noticed with the difference between e4 and d4, that with one e4 you have kind of a lot less systems available in order to basically maintain the balance as black. I mean, it's true I didn't mention the French, which probably is included as well, but I know it's already been 15 minutes in the video after all. Like, if I mentioned every single option, we'd be here forever. But so they can kind of see, like, with e4, like, the number of choices that really give you sure equality are quite small, but at the same time, like, you kind of know the ideas is pretty straightforward what the play is. Whereas with d4, there's kind of a lot more options for both sides. Although there are a lot more responses to d4 that will allow black to maintain equality, as I've shown you, but there are also a lot more options that white can play to get a type of position he likes, which is probably one reason why d4 is very popular, both among club players and online players, and also among the best players in the world. So yeah, that's my recommendation of top chess openings for black. Final tip I'll offer is that if they do play c4, if you want to punish this move, or I think that e5 is the way to go, just go knight f6, play d5, and you'll attempt getting a reverse Sicilian where white has absolutely nothing objectively. Of course, there are many Sicilian players who will say, yeah, I'm happy to play Sicilian with an extra tempo and outplay the opponent. Obviously, it's a legitimate practical choice, but given that this is top chess openings for black, the aim is not to say this are lines that give the press practical value, but instead to say these are lines that, according to, like, if we had, let's say, God tell us, like, well, these are the best openings, like, this is what God's answer would be based on, Stockfish and Correspondence players, basically, the chess equivalent of God in that sense. Alright guys, so that's about all I have for this video. Do make sure to comment below, like, which of these top chess openings would you like to play in your own games, or which maybe new one are you going to, learn and start playing. Well, good luck playing these openings. Do make sure to smash that like button. It really helps me to know that you like these videos and that it kept me making more videos like this one for you in the future. And also subscribe. I am doing 2 YouTube videos a day. I know it can be sometimes easy to miss out on a lesson that can really turbocharge your chess game. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get more of your my chess videos in your little feed there. Alright guys, see you in the next video.